Okay, let's try to talk about some fantasy books. Probably the biggest name in modern fantasy is Brandon Sanderson. Probably everybody has heard about Mistborn. Years ago, when I was working in a bookstore, I picked up Elantris, loved it, was great. The biggest issue I had with like most fantasy books is that there's just so many names that are confusing and long, and it's so hard to remember them. But I remember picking up Elantris, and just the writing style was so sweet. The world building was so interesting. There's this unique magic system, and I thought that wow, this is something special. Yeah, there's weird sounding words. There's like very fictional, sounding words. But it's a fantasy world. Whatever, I could get on board with that. I tried to read Mistborn, and I'm sorry, but for the life of me, I just could not get through it. I want to give it another chance. I want to try to read it again, um, mainly because I picked up the Stormlight Archive from the library. Which, by the way, funny story. When I picked it up from the library, this is a gigantic book. We're talking about 1,000 pages. And I remember just the librarian's face just staring at me like, you're not gonna read this. And then you have like 10 days to read the whole thing. You're not gonna read this, really. So I read it. I read it in 7 days. Huge accomplishment. The longest book I've ever read was The Brothers Karamazov, which took 2 weeks. As an 18-year-old, I read it. But this one was just so enjoyable that I fly through the whole book in 7 days, 1,000 pages. It was pretty crazy. That's all I did pretty much. I did nothing much else. Oh boy, let's talk about it. A Way of Kings, what a world that's created here. So the story follows pretty much the perspective of these three characters, with some minor characters here and there in the form of an epilogue, in the form of there's just so many epilogues actually. In the middle of the book, there's like these almost tiny stories within the larger book, but I don't remember any of those guys' names. They were not interesting at all in terms of as a character. Really, the book mainly is focused on Kaladin. Kaladin is one of the characters. There's three, so let's start with him first. Kaladin is such a good character. This is a person who had a very horrible childhood, then was went to this certain army, got betrayed, became a slave, and is working in this bridge crew now as a slave and trying to get out of slavery, basically. A very tough subject. He's such a wonderful character. He's the type of character that doubts himself a lot, yes. He definitely has very self-harming thoughts within him, but at the end of the day, there's this guiding voice, which is a windspread that is following him around, almost like a ghost that's following him around and almost encouraging him from time to time. And what a lovely character that windspread was. One of the best parts of the book. Second, we have Gavilar, Kholin. Gavilar is this military man, and he's one of the bright-eyed people. There's racism in this world. There's like bright eyes and there's darker colored eyes, and he's one of the bright-eyed people who's this very powerful general who is slightly and slowly losing his mind. This is the character I compared mostly to Ned Stark, and I love this character so much, Gavilar Kholin. I love him even more than Ned Stark because and why you would know more till the end of the book. First, the entire book, you just see him absolutely struggling with his mental health, with these visions he's having, with politics, because he's a strong, leader of a house. He has to do some politics, and you see him struggling in that too. But by the end of it, what a satisfying story arc, and I cannot wait to read more about Gavilar Kholin. I know that each book is focused on a specific character, and this is the one that I really want to read more of in the coming books. Shalan Davar. Now, while Kaladin and Gavilar are very, military focused, right? They're fighting all the time. There's conflict happening, and they're very close to each other in terms of their location. But Chalan is like somewhere far away, studying or trying to become I forgot what it's called. Award, maybe is the word. And she is basically is the student for another character named Jasna Kholin, who, yes, there's a relation between Gavidar and Jasna. Shalan, most people, when I watch reviews regarding this book, most people did not enjoy Shalan. I have to disagree. I thought this was a wonderful character. I fell in love with this character. She's amazing. Yes, the other characters are more interesting in this book, but that's because every book is going to get this main focus characters, and then the rest are going to be really as a support for you not to get fatigued by this main character in the book. So this is definitely Kaladin's book, but Chalan still has a very interesting story arc. She becomes even more interesting by the end of the book, and I really enjoyed her. I don't know what people are talking about when they say they don't like her. So this is a 1,000-page book. This is a massive, slow burn, but I loved every moment of it. It's so good. There are moments where it's way too slow. For example, the bridge crew, which is another set of characters I didn't talk about. They're basically friends with Kaladin, and he's trying to basically train these people, bring them together, make them a united force so they could try to escape this nightmare that they're all experiencing. The Bridge Crew are one of the best teams of any fantasy book. What a lovely group of people. They're so much fun. Rock is a character in the book that I absolutely love, and I want to see more of Rock in the future. And this is, despite being an epic fantasy book, the characters have such detail. They're so interesting. They're so relatable. They're so I mean, you want to sit down and have a conversation with these people. They're that good. But just because the characters are good does not mean that the world building was sacrificed in any way. The world building was amazing. There's a larger world. There's like a map at the beginning of the book, but you only really spend time in a very small portion of it, especially a place called the Shattered Plains, where is this desert that has destroyed plains that are spread out, and there's these storms that once in a while come through the world, and it just destroys and kills everything that it passes through. So people go in hiding when the storm comes in. Already those two things that I mentioned alone is already a lot of fertile ground for amazing storytelling. And Brandon Sanderson really utilizes the environment that these stories are taking place in. Now, that said, at the beginning of the book, we were introduced to almost like a combat system, right? Which I don't get to see again in this book. I'm very confident that's going to happen again in the other books. And we're going to see how really the magic system is really used with the way fighting happens in this world. I'm so interested to read more combat scenes with this magic system. It's so much fun. And I mean, I just fell in love with this book. But there are some small negatives. When you start the book, the first couple of chapters sound like complete gibberish because so many words are thrown at your face with not much explanation to what they are. But if you stick through it, by the end, you very much understand majority of them. There's a proper conclusion to this book. Another weird thing was the time jumps. You have a chapter where you're reading and you're like, oh, I'm really getting into this story. And then the next chapter is like 5,000 years ago. Or I don't know, 50 years ago, 7 years ago. The time jumps start getting smaller and smaller, and it all nicely ties in together. I mean, I can't wait for the next book. So another funny story in the library, I ordered the next book online, and then I went to the library and I found that they already have that copy of the second book. I had searched before and I didn't find Words of Radiance, so I had to order it, and then I found out they have it and I can't cancel my order. So that's kind of a weird thing that happened. But then again, I would love to own this book. I would love to own this entire series. It's just that good. This is definitely easily a 5 out of 5, despite the tiny criticisms I had. Easily one of the best fantasy books I've ever read. And I'm not really into fantasy traditionally, but I'm really excited to get more into the world of Roshnar that Brandon has created here. And that's the review. Thank you for spending your time here. Have a good one.